GrowCFO is where finance leaders grow together. Join thousands of like-minded professionals using GrowCFO to access the combined knowledge and experience of the finance leader community. You can join us today, growcfo.net. Hello and welcome to the GrowCFO Show. I'm your host, Kevin Appleby, and today got with me Jeff Martini, who is CFO at Bishop Lifting, and Ben Winter, who is one of the founders at Stuut. And we're going to talk about the CFO and how the CFO is adopting AI, because lots and lots of you will have seen the applicability of ChatGPT to many of the things that you're doing. But going beyond that, thinking AI agents and thinking about actually implementing AI in a useful way in your business isn't something that's that straightforward. So we're going to take a deep dive. But before we do that, Jeff, you're CFO at Bishop Lifting. Tell me a little bit about you at Bishop Lifting.
Sure. So I've been with the company for about 3 years. My background is as a CFO for the better part of the last 20 years for a variety of companies, all different types of revenue. So everything from rental businesses to distribution to a fair dose of manufacturing and service businesses as well. I'm based out of Houston, Texas. From an industry standpoint, if you've been here for a good long while, which I have, you find yourself overweighted in upstream oil and gas. So if you run your finger down my LinkedIn, that's what you'll find. And here at Bishop, what we do is we are an industrial distribution company where we sell anything that you would find, as we call it, below the hook. So all the bits and bobs you need to pick up big, heavy things, including hooks, shackles, slings, spreader bars, things like that. But anything that would not include the crane or the prime mover that would be picking up the load. So we've got about 45 locations across the US and Canada and find ourselves squarely in the middle market and also find ourselves being private equity backed.
So are you manufacturing those bits and bobs, or are you just reselling them?
A little bit of light assembly, but we are generally the value add distributors, how we think of ourselves.
Okay, so lots of accounts payable, lots of accounts receivable,
Correct.
lots of stock. Yep.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yes.
So a good traditional setup of that sort of thing from a finance point of view.
That is correct.
Ben, you're coming at this from a different angle as a founder. Tell me a little bit about you and Stuut.
Yeah, I'm Ben Winter. I'm one of the founders here at Stuut, COO. We started Stuut about a year and a half ago at this point. So young in days, but old in terms of experience. And as a founding team, our backgrounds were actually working on the AP side of the house before, working with large enterprises, mainly in procure to pay, and saw this problem on the AR side. And we're really interested in how we could help solve it for companies. You know, on the AP side, your goal is to reduce costs and control spending. But on the AR side, it's all about revenue generation. So it's viewed as the other side of the coin, but no one had really tackled it, mainly because there's just lots of unstructured data throughout your entire order to cash process, whether that's from contracting to invoices and order forms, through the actual collections process as well, and the feedback you get from your customers, then through payments and cash allocation deductions. And so what we've built here at Stuut is a series of AI agents that help automate those different processes from collections through cash application and deductions, with a team of agents that will also use human in the loop feedback to really support more efficient and better collections to ultimately reduce DSO and improve your working capital conditions.
Brilliant. I'm sure we'll come back and cover a lot more of the ins and outs of that as we go on through the show. But Jeff, you're implementing AI across your business.
Right.
How have you gone about that?
So I guess I can answer this a little bit more intelligently now than it was fairly happenstance, right? So if I were starting over, kind of knowing what I know now, it would be a more linear process, maybe is a good way to say this. But the way to think about it, I think, is to start understanding what AI is and what it's helpful with and what it's not. So what I mean by that is AI is good at dealing with messy data, and it is helpful to think about processes in your business that could be done by a low-level intern. So messy data and low-level intern, look for processes that are in the business that fit those two criteria, and those are good candidates for automation using AI. So
Okay.
it is dangerous to think about it as a blunt instrument. It is not a one-size-fits-all. It's kind of started this journey thinking about, I would just drop off the AI bot in my SQL server and wake up the next morning and be able to ask common language English questions and come up with amazing insight. Obviously,
It doesn't work like that, does it?
doesn't work like that, right? So where we have found some traction is in some very specific areas that fit those criteria of messy data and being able to be handled by a low-level intern, right? So accounts receivable is one of those. And within accounts receivable, it's collections, right? So collections, think about a low-level collector. What are they? They're going to make a call to your customer, and there only one of four things can happen out of this call. The collector can get a promise to pay. They can be requested of an invoice or statement. They can take payment. Hopefully that's the outcome. Or the customer is going to make a complaint and they're going to dispute the invoice. It turns out that AI is remarkably good at handling three out of those four, the first three, right? So they can take a payment, it can take a promise to pay, and it can respond by sending an invoice or a statement. It's not great at resolving issues just yet, but what it can do is it can pass that off to your collectors, and then those collectors can then escalate that within the business. So again, think about messy data, think about low-level intern kind of work, and we found great fit there and some other places as well that we can talk about too. But within AR, that was a very specific area, niche that fit the technology very well.
Okay, so you're taking those three use cases, all of which you can resolve with AI, and that fourth one, I guess that reading into that big plus is that the decent level of human staff that are dealing with accounts receivable are now focusing their attention on the bit that really needs their skills, which is about negotiating a solution. I don't think at this stage you would trust AI to negotiate on your behalf, would you?
That's exactly right. So there can be a variety of things that went wrong. So we're going to negotiate whether the customer received what we think that they received, whether we sent what we think we sent, whether there was damage in process. The list of disputes go on, right? Or pricing disputes or shipment disputes or freight or whatever, right? So these are many, many different problem solving things that people are good at, right? This is why we pay people to do. I would much rather pay somebody to have a human conversation with a customer rather than pay someone to find out that the customer needs another copy of the invoice. Technology can solve the latter, but not the former.
I guess even in that fourth case, though, AI can be of some use because you've got a dispute that says, okay, I didn't receive all of these goods. You presumably can go and ask AI to go and check the database to find
Absolutely.
out all of the dispatchers or any dispatchers that could have been to that company that might have had an error on them, things like that.
That's right. It can do the fact finding for you, for
Yeah.
sure. And then drop off the facts at the doorstep of your human employee and arm them with those facts to efficiently and effectively resolve the issue.
So,
Absolutely.
systems wise, then, Jeff, what are you using then to run your accounts receivable process?
Right. So the invoicing is all coming out of our ERP system, and then it drops off into Stuut, and Stuut picks up the data from that point forward. And it's a tool for the collectors to use and makes them much more efficient, right? So we're able to scale our collections effort substantially by using the tool because all the low level noise is handled by the agentic AI and drops off the actionable things that a human needs to tend to. And then it also is poised to do cash application as well. So it knows the knowledge of what's going on in the bank account, has knowledge of what's going on with our invoicing, and has the ability to push those data sets together and do cash application much more effectively and efficiently than a person can do it as well.
Okay, so we were talking, Ben, I think you mentioned the messy data you get right across accounts receivable. Now, you said there, Jeff, that Stuut is picking up the data from your ERP. Now, my gut reaction would be therefore that it must need data from other places too in order to do its job.
It does. So data inputs come from customer, right? So it's sending emails or making phone calls, agentic AI phone calls to our customers. So it is gathering collections data from the customers using those three items that I talked about before, either picking up the promise to pay, sending an invoice, or receiving payment. So there's a data input. And then, as I said, the bank statement as well. So it's plugged into the bank account and knows what's going on over there as well.
Okay. So where are you holding the contractual information, which must be a key part of this? Is that in the ERP system?
It is. It is. So all of the payment terms, all payment contracts or customer contracts, pricing agreements, things along those lines, those are all housed in the ERP. So this process picks up when the invoice is generated, and the invoice is going to contain that contractual information as far as payment terms, where the payment will be coming from, et cetera, the customer information. So it crosses the transom there and then becomes a collections and a cash application project after that.
Got you. Got you. Just stepping away from the nuts and bolts of how this works. Now, to implement something like this, that must have involved bringing along your finance team on a journey in terms of AI in accounts receivable and AI in other places in the business. How have you gone about that sort of change in the ways of working with the team?
Yeah. Yeah. So that's a great question. It's a culture shift, right? So we have what we're talking about right here within accounts receivable is part of a broader process overhaul within our back office. So we're doing similar things on the accounts payable side, which we can talk about as well, the agentic AI tool that we're in the midst of implementing on accounts payable at the same time. But it requires you to question everything, right? So why are we doing this? So why am I manually sending an invoice to a customer? Or how am I sending that invoice to the customer? Is kind of where this starts. Why do I feel like I have to call the customer to confirm receipt? I kind of have an agent do that for me. Do I have to email the customer after a few days or after a month? How do I deliver in our world? A proof of delivery is an important thing. So how do I deliver that proof of delivery? Do I need a human to do that, or can I automate that as well? And all of these questions demand answers that flow upstream. So the proof of delivery, as a for instance, we've got a embedded process that calls for the proof of delivery to be on hand and to be scanned into the ERP system at some point, right? So now we've got to tighten up that process because now I'm expecting an AI agent to send that to the customer at a certain time. So we need to change our upstream process to make sure that the proof of delivery is available at a date certain such that I can rely on that downstream and put the more mechanical process in place downstream. So it is within the accounts receivable group, which to this point has been a very clerical group that's been responsible for fact checking and ferreting out errors that happen upstream as much as possible. It's eliminating those errors upstream, turning this group into a higher level analytical group, a higher level customer service group, because believe it or not, customers want accurate information and timely, even if they owe you money. They don't want to wait around and get a surprise 60 days after the invoice has shipped. They want accurate information timely for their own systems, just as we all do. It frustrates us as CFOs to no end to receive an inaccurate invoice or not receive an invoice, et cetera. So it does require a change in thinking as far as how you staff and what your expectations are of that staff.
Okay, so does that mean that you've needed to change the personnel in the team?
In some cases, yes. In many cases, no. There are folks that are plastic enough, I suppose is the right term, to accept that process change, and they're fine, right? In some cases, we have had to upskill. So we didn't have a collections group, believe it or not. So we had to shift our resource towards a collections mindset. We just didn't have a skill set under roof. So we had to go buy that skill. But the folks are very capable. They're very capable in their old role and very capable in adding value in different ways as well.
So, Ben, just before we started recording, you were telling me that one of the things that you'd seen in the world at the moment is the number of failed AI projects. Now, it sounds as though Jeff has got this very much wrapped up and has a way of doing this. What are you seeing elsewhere?
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing and hearing a lot of things that Jeff is experiencing as well. I think when it comes to like people, for example, everyone I think now has been exposed to AI in some form where a year and a half ago that may have not been true. Right? I think the majority of people have played around with ChatGPT or something like that. They're seeing it more and it's in their cell phones now. It's in different applications. There's AI suggestions. And so I think the experience is there in terms of being comfortable with what AI is and what it can do. I think it's how it applies to my job. And I think with a lot of projects, people are at first were more interested in the technology and saying, hey, I have this AI thing, I have this AI feature, I have this outcome that's maybe ambiguous, but I'm implementing AI. And I think what you've seen over the last 6 to 12 months very quickly is that shifted from we spent a bunch of money and invested a lot of time in building this maybe AI forward feature, but it didn't actually yield any results. So how do I actually solve the problems I have? Where do I apply AI versus not? Right. So I think in Jeff's examples, the areas where they're applying AI are where AI excels versus I guarantee if Jeff gave an AI agent his Excel model, on his finances, that the AI agent would not perform very well at helping him do the analysis he needs to get done because the mathematical capabilities are getting much, much better, but they're not the same as they are for, let's say, NLP and language processing. And so I think it's really about helping guide people towards where's the actual pain here, where are the results that you can drive, and how do you get there? So the way that Jeff talks about how his team interacts and does fact finding is exactly what we see here, right? Our original stance when we started our company was accounts receivable as a revenue function. There are all these upstream things that happen that flow down towards the finance and AR team, and they're just left trying to figure out the different pieces and what's actually going with each customer. And a bad AR process actually creates a negative customer experience. It is a customer facing function, whether people decide that it should be or not. And so the way that you go about doing that is you need to coordinate with your team, right? You need your account managers, you need your sellers, you need your shipping team and your fulfillment team to all be involved in making sure the customer's getting the right invoices that are accurate at the right times. And so I think it's really about knowing those pain points, knowing what technology can actually solve those problems, and putting them together to actually drive towards an impact. So one of the things that we do at Stuut here is we make sure we know exactly what the customer wants to solve. Do they need to reduce DSO? Do they need to improve their collections on very overdue invoices? Are they trying to expand their revenue function and as a result, don't want to add more headcount on their finance team? What are the results that you're trying to achieve? And how do we help you do that? And having that clear outcome drives the right results that actually create a successful project versus a failed project.
Yeah. So when you're talking to a new client, Ben, do most folk know what's possible with the AI at the moment? Or is it very much you having to educate people at what can be done?
I don't always know what's possible when it comes to AI. I think it's one of those things that it is rapidly changing. So last week, we actually announced our AI agent can now on the phone, can change languages based on how someone picks up the phone. So if you call someone and say hello in English and they respond back in German, the agent will now have the conversation in German. The advancements that are happening on a daily basis with new
Wow.
AI agents and new AI models is always changing. I think we look to work with customers is, do you have a clear vision for how this can solve a problem that you have? And then we will work with you to make sure that the technology can support that both today and in the future. And so I think we're viewed as a valued partner, and I hope Jeff can attest to this, is we're constantly seeing what AI can do and where we can push the limits and where we can continue to move forward and help our customers move forward along that journey, because we do want to get to the point where a seller could actually be the collector as well in the long run, right? They own the relationship. They're the one who makes the sale. If they could own the actual collections process, while not everyone says sellers need to sell, and we agree with that as well, that's their job, but they also own the relationship. And so could they actually help collect as well? We're not there right now. I don't know if we'll be there in a year or 2 years, but we're going to help our customers get there because that's where you have a positive relationship while also making sure that you're getting paid on in a timely fashion.
Yeah. Wow. It strikes me, Ben, that one of the issues that we've got, as you say, AI is advancing really quickly.
Yeah.
Therefore, how is the CFO expected to keep up with the art of the possible? Now, we all had a fair idea, going back maybe 5 years, how to automate parts of an accounts payable or an accounts receivable process using traditional technologies. We've got new tech that's changing almost on a weekly basis. How am I supposed to know as a CFO what good looks like anymore?
Yeah. I think it's a really good question. I think one that you have partners you trust, partners who are thinking about things from a AI first perspective, while you're then also bringing the CFO finance first perspective and balancing those two. That's one of the reasons why we do a lot of our work involves a human in the loop. So when Jeff mentions disputes, having an agent go and handle a dispute with a customer would be probably a terrible experience for the customer. And so that's an area where you have to put really tight guardrails around what the agent can do autonomously and what the AI agent cannot do autonomously. And I think having those partners who can set up those guardrails, but then also notify you and say, hey, we've now pulled in your contract data. We've pulled in your bill of lading and your proof of delivery data. We have all of this. The agent can actually triangulate what's going on here very quickly And I'll either allow a human to just triage it and then approve it, or in certain situations where we have, I never say 100% confidence, but 99% confidence, let the agent start handling some of these. And that's where I think you start to move people towards what's possible versus not. So the guardrails and knowing what outcomes you shouldn't solve and what outcomes you can solve, and then showing with technology how you can maybe solve a new problem you couldn't solve a month ago and show how the results come there and let the human approve it. That's how we approach it. We want the humans to be able to have confidence that the agent's making the right decisions, but also we personally want to have confidence that our agents are making the right decisions. And there's no better person to do that than a collector who lives the job every single day. And so when you have those two working in tandem, we always talk about it as like you just hire an intern who will work for you 24/7, who is consistently learning what your preferences are, and you can teach it new preferences. When you frame it that way, and the intern can get smarter and smarter over time, you allow the agent to actually interact with and learn and become productive in an autonomous way versus, as Jeff mentioned before, let's just drop an agent into our SQL database and let it do whatever it's going to do. It's going to do things that you're not going to want it to do, and that's a bad outcome.
Yeah. So, Jeff, you've taken Stuut and put it in accounts receivable. You also said you've done things in other parts of the business. Are you taking a similar approach and taking an agentic system and dropping it in alongside what you've already got?
Yeah, so there are actually 4 nodes that were in varying levels of advancement. We're farthest along with accounts receivable. An accounts payable project, I've kicked that off. So we've selected a partner there that can be helpful with our fairly high volume of three-way matching and other invoices that require some approval routing. A couple of other areas we sell through inside sales and enabling that interaction to be more efficient. So giving our inside salespeople opportunities to more efficiently select what the customer wants from a very extensive catalog of 100,000 SKUs or more, and then also giving them the opportunity to do cross-selling and upselling. So there are revenue opportunities here. And then bringing it back home to the office of the CFO, account reconciliations. That's untapped potential for us as well. There are many tools out there to make that process more efficient. But a question you asked a moment ago, how's a CFO to know what good looks like anymore? There is something to this. I'm watching all these tools, they're moving in real time, right? So I reflect on how we're going through software evaluation today compared to even just 12, 24 months ago, right? So the experience of a year or two ago, think of an ERP implementation. And think of an RFQ, an old RFQ for an ERP, right? You're asked dozens of questions. Does the software do this, that, or the other thing?
Yeah, in a former life as a consultant, I've responded to a good few of those.
There you go. Indeed.
The most fun.
Yeah.
And the evidence is going to be whether the software does that or not today. What we're experiencing in selecting these tools now is not does the software do these things today, but do I trust that the developer is working on something where it's going to do that in short order? So what I tell vendors now is if you haven't developed your software in the last 15 minutes, you don't really have agentic AI baked into your code. Definitionally, it's an afterthought, right? Because this agentic AI stuff is about that old. So finding a tried and true, a trusted blue chip brand that is agentic AI forward doesn't exist. We reach out and find folks like Ben, very smart organizations that get it, that understand what the commercial challenges are and are seeking to solve those with software, but haven't necessarily solved them yet.
Yeah. So do you think it's inevitable then that the tech stack gets more complicated with more bits bolted onto it?
I absolutely do. So I've got a view on the future of ERP that is quite different from where we see it today. So we used to use way back when, old enough to remember when we cobbled together ERP or functionality based on best of breed. Right? So we had a series of tools that we all put together. Then the pendulum swung the other way, and we bought these large monolithic systems that tried to do everything for every type of business. And I think the pendulum is swinging back the other direction again. I'm starting to see the ERP as a collection of tables that are fed by and fed into other tools. And it's a nature of the beast that we're in a fairly chaotic isn't quite the right word, but disparate systems are doing things differently, as Ben described, right? So we've got a fairly niche player here in Stuut that does something fairly narrow very, very well. And found somebody on the AP side. And as I mentioned, these other couple of nodes as well. So these are best of breed, and they are feeding our ERP system. And the interface, the ERP becomes a whole lot less relevant to a collector. I mean, frankly, it's irrelevant, right? The collector may or may not even ever log into the ERP going forward, and instead experiences collections through a tool like Stuut. Similarly on the
think
AP side.
I think what Jeff said too, Kevin, is really interesting. Is when you ask about how finance leaders can think about AI be a bit different, is the idea of an RFQ model or an RFP where you're asking questions about features and functionality is no longer the frame of reference to which you actually ask and buy software. It's what outcome can you deliver for me? The features and functionality is actually can be a limiting factor. Like the UI is limiting in some ways of, oh, I want to be able to click these buttons and sort this table this way or rearrange my columns with my own custom tabs. That UI construct is no longer the way that AI first companies think. They'd rather service you the data in a chat model, for example, and then let you query the data yourself versus let me manage all these different tables and views for you so you can dig in and find the answer you're looking for yourself. And so I think with that frame of reference, the CFOs that we see pushing the boundaries and getting towards this maybe new paradigm shift in software are thinking about outcomes and asking what outcomes can I drive with this tool? Not do you have this button that can do this thing, or do you have this UI, or do you have this module? And as a result, they're getting the outcome versus buying a software that may or may not achieve that outcome, right? Like, oh, this software checks all these boxes in my RFP Excel sheet. There's 1,000 of them, and they click 990. Okay, but at the end of the day, it took us a year and a half to implement, and no one actually uses 987 of the 990 features they had. So what was the point of purchasing that software? Is it actually driving a result that we want? And I think people like Jeff are really needing this new version of, okay, I want to reduce DSO and I want to scale my collections effort without adding an entire massive team. Who can do that for me? And how are you going to do it? And how are you going to continue to push the envelope over time and build and build and build? And I think that's the new shift in terms of like the CFO's mindset.
Yeah. So I guess from an implementation point of view then, Ben, this really fits an agile type of implementation methodology. You find out what outcomes required, you do some stuff to deliver the outcome, and in the process of that, you start the imagination process of the project team going and saying, oh, what if it could do this? What if it could do that?
Yeah. And I think the speed is a huge component here, right? So as Jeff mentioned, like the most important data for us to leverage in terms of making the agent more efficient is the communication back and forth with the customer. Let's just use the collections workflow. I can see your templates and I can send outbound messages using the format you want to do. That's a pretty easy use case for the agent. What happens with the types of responses I get back? How many times am I getting promised to pay dates? How often are people asking for invoice copies? How often are people asking for bill of lading or proof of delivery? Or how often are people saying this invoice is incorrect? How do you identify the issues along your sort of your collections order to cash lifecycle, and where do those issues exist are where you then get the results that you want, right? And so for us, speed is what we harp on and we try and move very quickly. We have customers who are up and running within a day or two, sometimes usually at most it's a couple weeks. And as a result, you're getting real value very quickly, but also starting that journey of collecting all that information that is the most valuable to fixing your order to cash lifecycle and also making the agent smarter and understanding how it needs to respond to different types of situations.
Brilliant. Brilliant. So, Jeff, talk me through the investment case for this. You've still got your ERP system and all the people that are running that, and
Right.
you've implemented some extra bits in accounts payable, in accounts receivable, in reconciliations that are clearly costing you more money. Where's the
Right.
payback coming from?
Right. So it's an efficiency play in all of these cases. So the efficiency manifests itself in enabling the existing folks to do more value added activities, right? Let's use my inside sales as a for instance. If I can make my inside sales more efficient, that frees them up to be able to do more inside sales. They can even do more active customer outreach. They can do more upsell. They can do more cross sell. So it's an unlock to be able to get to more revenue in that case. In the case of accounts payable, it allows me to scale the business. Bishop happens to be highly acquisition focused. So we're bringing many more businesses in the fold. So it allows my accounts payable group to take these other businesses and to collapse them into my shared services much more quickly and to be able to handle more volume with the same headcount.
So you're not going out and out to look for headcount savings. You're looking to do generally more with the same people.
In some cases, I can, right? So it gives me the optionality.
Yeah.
I guess I can go either way, right? So I've got a decision to make. I can redeploy existing resource into value added activities. Or if I'm under some operating expense pressure, I can go respond to that as well. So I can go in either direction. So it's an unlock to be able to go a couple different directions.
Yeah. I guess one of the big challenges here, though, is if you take away 10% of 10 people's jobs, you don't save a person. It's very hard to save a person. And that's always the problem of unlocking headcount savings in these sorts of areas.
That's right. So as I was talking about before, it requires some upstream rethinking of process. So in that, using your numbers, it requires me to go find a way to do that with 9 people rather than 10 people if I'm looking for a 10% headcount reduction. So I need to restructure jobs. So I think the right way to be thinking about this is functions rather than people replacement, or it's upgrading functions. And then that enables you and requires you as a manager to go figure out what to do with that efficiency, which is a high class problem to have.
Yeah, I think you're seeing people move away from headcount unlock to outcomes based, as I keep on saying. I don't want to harp on it, but like, how do you create more revenue? How do I grow my business? People who are looking at agentic software are thinking that way, which is really interesting because you'd think it would be a replacement always for like, hey, I don't need this person anymore, but that's not true. There actually are a lot of things that person's probably not doing that are actually they should be doing. And how do you unlock them to do those things that are actually where you need that human to be versus making 50 phone calls a day that takes up half their day versus resolving a more strategic, higher unlock issues that are pressing to the business, but often you don't get time to do.
And that's a very interesting note to leave this on, to say that an awful lot of fear has been around in accounts functions around AI is going to take your job. What I'm hearing from both Ben and Jeff here is that AI probably isn't going to take your job. It could be a person who knows how to use AI better than you do might take your job. So make sure you keep up to speed with this stuff. But this is the future of growing businesses and growing businesses quickly.
Couldn't agree more.
Well said.
Jeff, so how do CFOs do software selection in the new world? Now, the game has changed so much from what we've been hearing.
Indeed it has. So it is remarkably different because it is based on, when we're talking about this area of AI forward software, because there are no established players out there that have started developing their code with AI as the foundation, there is an immense amount of trust required that these companies are going to be around for a while. It also demands that you fail fast. If you're going to fail, you need to get that out of the way and move on to the next one very quickly. There's no room for a 6-month implementation and to find value after 9. So the vendors that stand out are the ones that can deliver value, deliver solutions in weeks at most, not in months. So the relationship is based on trust. That's the price of poker. The trust is validated with a very quick proof point. And then once that trust is established and validated, then you continue to build on both of those and continue to build functionality that solves specific problems that are, as Ben points out, these outcomes that we're all craving.
Yeah, I agree.
And I guess you've got to take some sort of a risk in there, because you see a company that's relatively young, seems to have the solution you want to do today. 6 months down the line, there might be another company has an even better solution. You probably haven't got the luxury of that choice to make.
You may, right? Actually, we might find somebody in 6 months that's even better. So that's why the upfront investment can't be very high, frankly, for either side, right? It can't be that high for the software vendor either, the partner, because they can't afford to make very large investments very early on. So they need to be relying on eating their own dog food, as they say. They need to be relying on their agentic AI to stand up their software, their environment in favor of their customers very quickly. And the buyer, the company, can't afford to be spending a lot of IT resource to stand this up either. So we need to get to value very quickly. Again, in contrast to the more traditional software acquisition cycle that lasts months and, God forbid, years as well.
Puts the pressure on us transparently. We have to not only deliver value fast, but continue to deliver value, or someone else is going to come in and replace that with something better. And so I think that's what's so impactful about this new paradigm that we're in is you have to, as a vendor, continually help your customer grow. Like what you did 6 months ago is going to rapidly change, and how you deliver value is going to continue to change, and you have to continue to innovate. You can't, as Jeff mentioned, lock yourself into a 3-year contract and just be held to that sort of, well, we're delivering these features. It's all about outcomes and how you continue to deliver outcomes for the business. And so I think it's really exciting. It's a really fun time to be able to continue to push and always improve and always deliver new things that continually unlock more things for our customers. I think it's people who are looking into that. You're seeing them build these really strong partnerships with their customers around new workflows and new ways of impacting the business.
Brilliant. Jeff, Ben, thank you for being this week's guests on the GrowCFO Show.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.